But you don't have to do it now. I'm gonna keep looking at it.
Good evening. My name is Matt Lawless. I serve as Scottsville's town administrator. You're viewing the meeting recording and stream for the town council work session held on Monday, November 8th, 2021. This meeting is held in compliance with Virginia Freedom of Information Act, open meeting laws, and the town of Scottsville's ordinance on the continuity of government during the COVID-19 emergency. We have several opportunities for the public to participate in the meeting here this evening. We're open to the public at the town hall, 401 Valley Street. We also have opportunities to participate remotely by telephone, on our Zoom stream live, and by viewing the meeting in the future on the town's YouTube channel. Thank you very much for participating in all those ways. The work session will begin here in 6 minutes, 6 minutes until 7 o'clock time now. So if you're watching in the future, thank you very much. Just skip ahead 6 minutes on your stream and you'll see us come to order. I'll mute the slide and camera now. Thank you.
Good. That's all right. That's good. All right. Okay, I think we've got all our things in a row right now, so we'll call this session of the Scottsville Town Council work session to order. I noticed we have several folks in the audience tonight, and I would just remind you at this point, this is a work session for the town council. There's no public comments during this session. If you wish to make a public comment, next Monday is your chance. We'll start with reports. Chief Pasolka, would you like to tell us what's going on with the police department?
Good evening, sir, and members of the Town Council. I was told that chief would normally stand right here, so
Yeah, where'd our podium go?
I'm a little bit sore today because we're putting down a new floor in the police department.
All right.
Like a dungeon down there, so we wanted to make it look a little bit more welcoming to our citizens. There's only two major issues that have come up, actually three, but one was just outside of town. That was an ATV that was stolen from the fire department. But the other two incidents was on Halloween. We had somebody drive into our town with a family member who was deceased. They were from Buckingham. They pulled into town and stopped when they saw one of our town police officers. It didn't happen in our jurisdiction. We called the proper jurisdiction and they took over the investigation. From what I understand, there's no foul play. They were just trying to get to the hospital. The other incident of interest was the shooting we had in the parking lot of a shopping center. There's a lot of rumors going around about that. I'll be more happy to answer any questions you have about any of these incidents, but let me just start off by saying it was a domestic between a boyfriend and girlfriend that happened in the parking lot. It was a very short duration. And then the male partner shot the female partner in the face. She is alive. That was one of the rumors that she died. There's another rumor that it started in one of the restaurants and people were being very short, rude, say a couple other words to describe it to the owners of the restaurant as if they had something to do with it or didn't call the police in time. Now, there were a couple of Scottsville residents who did call the police right away, and they were probably instrumental in saving the young lady's life because we don't know if he was going to take her to the hospital or not, but they were stopped right at the market about halfway up in the town, and that's when he was taken into custody and she was taken to the hospital. Any questions about those? Yes.
The first incident, someone driving someone to the hospital, were they locals?
No. Matter of fact, in almost every situation where we have any type of disturbance or issue, including my stats that are on the wall over there, and some of you may have copies. I would have a copy in my hand, but when we moved the printer to put down the floor, it got disconnected. I couldn't get it reconnected in time, so I apologize for that. But in none of those situations are most of our, for lack of a better word, problem children, residents of Scottsville. We have, as you know, we have a lot of transient population coming to Scottsville through Scottsville. That's where most of our speeding issues come from. That's where most of our parking issues come from. And that's where all three of these issues came from, obviously, too. They were from Buckingham.
So I was just wondering, if the justice caused by lack of EMS response in Buckingham.
Probably not. It's probably caused by, I'm trying to be polite here, probably lack of knowledge on the part of the family members. Sister and husband found her and brought her as fast as they could. They were on the line with our 911 center. And they were trying to get them to pull over to get EMS in faster. It's really kind of hard to get an ambulance, at a moving target. So they pulled over there, but the time frame that had been, there was no reason or no point in giving CPR at that point, because the time frame that would have been missed. But just the time frame from the time that they called 911 to the time that a police officer made contact with them. But we also don't know. She was not found for probably some time. Officer Barnett was the responding officer, and according to him, she was pulled to the touch. So we would normally not, that's our procedure, we would not start CPR.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate all you're doing. For the Chamber of Commerce report, we had a board meeting this past Wednesday, and we're working with SCAN and town for December 4th holiday celebrations, which will be the tree lighting and events throughout the day. So once that gets, everything gets finalized, SCAN will be handling the advertising on that, and there will be posters and brochures galore. So that's the chamber report. ARB, Mr. Bullock.
Yep. We have decided to move forward with a interview for an architect to fill our teaming vacancy on the ARB. Our last meeting, we decided to leave our one vacancy open in the interest of doing our due diligence to recruit an architect. This is in alignment with our certified local government application to state, as well as to get that expertise on the board. We have had an applicant, and so our next ARB meeting in December, we'll be interviewing that applicant for the position. Sort of big news. We went through the plans for our inventory of historic homes. We're going to be taking advantage of our Microsoft 360 capacity to try to save staff some work, and also to just be more efficient now that we can share documents. So we'll be doing that, and then also approved COA for the door painting at the Riverbend Boutiques, as well as some landscaping around the parking lot that's been built off Harrison, related to that same property for Airbnb.
Okay, that it. Any questions for Mr. Bullock? In the absence of our planning commission member this evening, I'll ask Mr. Lawless if he could fill us in on last week's planning commission meeting.
Yes, sir. Planning Commission met twice since your last work session. They had a pretty heavy workload of new applications and ongoing projects moving through. So they split their workload into two meetings, a special meeting at the end of October, and then their regular meeting last week. So they reported out a good number of items, which are here in this agenda packet. So I'll work through these in the order that they're shown. Two special use permits for cluster density on Glenham Road and Bird Street, village residential cluster option. Planning Commission had those public hearings last month, received a resident petition, and had some research reports. I'd like to present a little bit of staff work on those too, a little bit later in the agenda to bring you up to speed on what we've got here. Planning Commission did recommend those out on a pair of 2-to-1 votes, recommending approval of the special use permits with a number of conditions. Those conditions can be tailored, and of course, Town Council has the power now to deny, approve, or approve with conditions, either the same conditions that Planning Commission brought forward or any change to those. And Town Council has to have its own public hearing. You can certainly hold further public outreach in addition to that before moving forward. I was very happy to have some additional research help from Mr. Waring, our new graduate intern, as we work through what are some of the more complicated applications that the town's gotten in the past few years. So I'd like him to share some of his work a little bit later on. The other Planning Commission report outs were a zoning map amendment, about a 1/3 acre area on James River Road. This is the Tiger Fuels Market project that was before Town Council this time last year. The Tiger Fuels company had bought the surrounding Dawson tract on that parcel, and there's a driveway entrance there on Valley Street across from BB&T, which they've rearranged the parcel lines, so it's now part of the same parcel. They'd like all of that to be zoned commercial, which has some buffer effects and changes the site plan slightly. Planning Commission reviewed those, had some concerns about the landscaping, but did advance that zoning map amendment forward on a recommendation. Same process, town council needs its own public hearing on that one, and can choose zoning that's the same or make the change to commercial. In the ongoing work of examining the town's zoning ordinance, the planning commission also studied 2 sections of that where we know we have some inconsistencies and recommended out on 4-0 votes 2 updates to the zoning ordinance. The first of those is a floodplain section. The State Department of Conservation and Recreation advises localities on how to best manage their floodplains, and they published an improved model ordinance of guiding zoning text for localities back in 2017. The town wasn't able to make those updates at that time, but they remain the best practices in the industry and have some improvements over what's in effect at the town level now, especially as it relates to accessory buildings like garden sheds, mobile homes, and historic buildings. And those are all things that the town has and needs the best practices to regulate. So Planning Commission recommended matching the new state model ordinance. The last one is a parking regulation, not directly related to the 2-hour parking issue that's been in past work sessions, but rather the parking requirements in the historic district. We have a waiver to some of our parking regulations on Valley Street, but that waiver does not apply on Main Street. And we've heard feedback that that's a problem for investors who are trying to renovate historic buildings and are vexed by the parking requirements that are in place. So the Planning Commission recommended matching the parking regulations on Valley and Main on the idea that it would create a little more flexibility for historic renovations on Main Street. So all of those items are headed in for town council action now. Council can of course call the public hearings on these things in any sequence that you see fit to in any of your upcoming meetings.
Any questions for Matt?
If we have questions about these items, should we just hold them until new topics later in the agenda?
If you please, we have space on agenda for that.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. Treasurer's report.
Your financial report for this month is looking pretty good. You're 1/3 of the way through the current fiscal year, and we've seen good progress in many of the town's local revenues. We've seen maybe national news about disruptions to retail shopping, supply chain issues, and inflation concerns. We have not seen the sales impacts of that here in town yet. Meal tax revenues remain strong. Several restaurants have reported some of their best months of revenue ever. Some of that may come from price increases. When they increase their prices, they earn more, they gross more revenue, and they pay more tax. That helps the town's revenue lines. We may also be seeing that in sales tax. Some of the inflation news that you see, prices go up, people continue shopping online heavily. That helps with the sales tax formula coming into the town. But we even see strong growth in lines like transient occupancy tax. We've had a couple of new Airbnbs open up in town, and those are doing well. They pay on a quarterly basis, and that's already exceeded the town's projection. Similarly, with the vehicle license fee, that revenue line is over 100% for the year as those batch of payments come in. At the same time, the town's spending is a little bit ahead of schedule. That mostly relates to rapid progress on things like capital construction. As we get into the new year on July 1st, knowing that there's a few projects that we want to jump on, things like the DMV office renovation, that spending is complete. So on the whole, we've earned more money than we spent for the fiscal year to date, which is not how the town's budget usually proceeds. We usually find ourselves making up revenue at the end of the year, but the American Rescue Plan revenue at the beginning of this fiscal year puts us in a much more solid footing for the whole year. Happy to answer other questions about budget and spending we have now.
Any questions for
Thanks,
Matt?
Matt. That sounds great.
Okay,
I have actually.
all right.
I know we have a meals tax. Do we get any revenue from the sale of groceries?
Sales tax all mixes together. So when you check out at the grocery store,
Yeah.
there's that low sales tax, lower than the general retail sales. There's a low grocery store sales tax.
Yeah.
All of that money goes to Richmond.
Okay.
And then it goes back to the county offices based on population. Then there's a further formula that gets it to the town.
Okay.
So we get a check every month that's from Albemarle County, which is based on a population formula to us. So it's not one that we collect directly, but it moves through on that sales and population basis.
I would add to that, our business license tax is variable based on the gross receipts of the prior year. And the grocery store generally being the highest volume, albeit maybe one of the lower margin businesses in town, tends to be one of our largest contributors to the business license tax category as well.
If there is a change to the grocery tax, to what extent is that going to affect us?
Yes, it would affect us. It would be that much fewer taxable sales. The reduction would be, I think, pretty small in percentage terms. It would be how much of the pie of your family spending is grocery spending.
Right.
And the grocery tax is a little bit less than what you pay on shoes.
Yeah.
So if the state grocery tax went away, the town would lose money.
Okay.
Can't tell you offhand how much though.
Okay. So it's a relatively small percentage. Of the town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Matt? I've met in the middle of October, had a meeting with some folks who own property that is already zoned for development, and they are thinking about it. And so this is it's nothing definite yet, but they have some interesting thoughts on that subject. Met with the chief a number of times over the past couple of weeks, making sure he and I actually went on a sort of traffic stop. This great big tractor trailer comes across the bridge and he whips over to the other side of the road and parks in the southbound lane heading north, and so he can unload it at Michi's. So the chief and I went over and had a nice chat with the driver, and he understood he's not supposed to do that sort of thing. So that was fun. We had a meeting last Thursday with Donna Price, and primarily we were talked about our meeting coming up tomorrow night with the Board of Supervisors, which we'll get into under new topics. Now, our council member and planning commission chairman has resigned. There's sort of two parts to this story, and the first part is more personal, so I'm not even going to talk about that. The second part is public, and this is what's really gotten me upset. With the talk about developing property in town and around town, planning commission chairman has been approached numerous times on the street and in her front yard by some citizens of Scottsville who have made threats, intimidated, and it's just not what the people of Scottsville are. They don't go around harassing and intimidating a volunteer member of council. It's just not, you know, it reminded me of some of these school board meetings you see on the news where somebody wants to get in a fist fight outside. And indirectly, they have intimidated and threatened the council members, all of you and me, I guess, because they said things to her like, we know where you live. If this thing passes, you know, we'll take care of it. Just things that you wouldn't expect residents of Scottsville. And it came to a point where phone calls or texts late at night. So the Lamberts have put their house on the market. They're leaving. We're losing a good member of our community, two good members of our community. We're losing a very knowledgeable planning commission chairman and council member. And I just think that the people of Scottsville, it's like, one bad apple just puts a whole blemish on the whole pile. And, the 99.9% of the people in Scottsville are nice, decent, honest, care for your neighbor type people. But there are 3 or 4 out there that have shown themselves to be real jerks. So for that reason, we have now a vacancy on council and a vacancy on the planning commission. And no matter what your position is on any development, it's just a real shame that we have lost somebody as talented as Sherry Lambert to the taunts and I don't even know the right word to use, intimidation by people that can't see how the process works, that if we were to pass something for 20 houses, it would 5 years from now, there might be 2 or 3 built. It's a long drawn out process, and the public has every chance in the world to put their input. They don't have to do it on the street in a threatening manner to a member of our planning commission. And I just hope these people will come around to their senses and not be, if they represent anything, it's the vast minority of Scottsville residents, not the majority. So that's my report, and I just thank Sherry for all she's done for us in the brief time she's been here. And if anybody has any questions, I will be glad to answer.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say I appreciate your words. As I've already mentioned to you, I'm going to speak on the same subject a little bit later.
Okay.
And I thank you too for the follow-up that you've given Ms. Lambert too, to try to be helpful. And I regret that this situation happened and you didn't better understand it when it was happening. This is not the kind of thing, I agree with you, that we would want to have happen in our town.
Yep. So,
Well,
yes, sir.
I don't think these people that, made the threats, etc., will be identified. However, someone knows who we are, and whether it's on the street or in this building, a threat was made to someone on the commission and the council. So
Yeah.
is there any way to ban them from future meetings?
Well, Matt's suggestion was if we knew who they were, we would talk to them personally. We're hesitant to get law enforcement involved since it is somebody that has a feeling about a matter and they're just mouthing off, maybe to make themselves feel better. I don't know. It's just uncalled for to intimidate somebody and say, okay, well, you're a member of the council. Well, they better watch out too. It's hard enough to get somebody to volunteer to serve on council, on a committee, do anything for the town. People want to complain and jump up and down and fuss about things, but they don't want to volunteer. So,
I don't want to be like Albemarle County, and think I'm gonna have Zoom meetings
yeah,
forever.
right.
And this is open to the public, if public behaves themselves.
Right. And
As Albemarle County should be, by the way.
right. And as I said to Matt earlier today, we're going to go over these rules of procedure for public input. But as long as everybody is welcome to speak their mind to us in person or to the planning commission in person or the ARB in person, as long as they keep it civil, they can say whatever they want to. And if they say something that upsets, if they're talking to you and you don't like what they're saying, it's not my place to tell them to be quiet and defend you. You're an adult, you defend yourself. I'll back you. But if somebody says something bad about Scottsville or about the council as a whole, then yes, I'm going to defend that group or the town. But if it's a one-on-one thing, I know you had some words one night with one county supervisor, and that was that was between the two of you. So it's not my place to jump in and say, tell the speaker to be quiet or tell the council person to, be quiet. You're adults. You figure out how you're going to respond to a question. My usual response is, thank you for your time and your input, and we'll talk about it later. So anyhow, that's all. Yes, Mr. Bullock.
I thank you all for your comments sincerely. I'm deeply, deeply disturbed by how this is coming.
Yeah.
And I echo Eddie's concerns as well, in terms of public safety of ourselves on this body. And what we can do as a board to keep ourselves safe is executing a public function. Because government by intimidation is not government.
Exactly.
And I guess to the point of civility, I'm not sure what legal recourse we may have, but I think it would be helpful if the town made a statement, a public one, in just larger venue as we can locally, about this. Because it is a serious issue, and if we feel that it's serious, then we should express it in a manner that fits the seriousness in which we see it.
I agree with you.
I'd like to see the council recognize Sherry, even though she was here a short time. In fact, she was new. She was excited about being here, volunteered right away, and had a lot of input. Things we'll be talking about tonight, for example. I think she will be recognized.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, just to say, unfortunately, she came in, I mean, having been on the council a long time, it's not common that we have tumultuousness. And she just happened to come at a time where it is, and she got caught in a crosswind, which is not a good crosswind, which Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you, all of your sentiments. And I mean, we are wanting to have the freedom of speech. We want everybody to have a chance to have the freedom to speak. And at the same time, in the middle of even heated debate, we need to be respectful of each other. I mean, everybody at this table has different opinions of things. Everybody in this room has different opinions, but it's helpful that we model something different than what's happening in the rest of the world. We should be a better example to our kids. Actually, our kids need to see a better example of us relating. And when I say us, I mean collectively as a community. And this does not look good. It's not a good situation.
Okay. Any other comments?
In fact, I may just we can clarify that. I don't mean look good. It isn't good. It's not just doesn't look good. It's not good.
And now we have a person that was a valuable member of the community, and wherever they go, they're going to say, I'd never live there again. So.
Yeah, I just like the second council boss.
Okay, we will come up with something.
Some sort of a public stand.
Yeah.
It's important.
Okay. We'll work on that this week and present it next council meeting. We'll work on that this week and have something ready by Monday.
Yeah, I would be inclined to get law involved.
Okay.
So I almost feel the state would be a way to do it.
Okay.
Public forum.
If you have thoughts about what you would want to say in this statement, just email them to me and we'll, coordinate all the different points of view into something that is appropriate. Okay. Yeah, I see Mr. Bowling's face up there, or name or something. Yeah, Mr. Bowling.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. How you feeling?
Well, I'm here in body, and
You gonna set off?
and most of me is here. I don't know about my right shoulder and arm, but they say I can see it, so something's there.
Well, good. Are you gonna start setting off airplane detectors in the airports now?
I'm looking forward to that. They give
Okay.
you a card.
All right, what you got for us? Anything?
First, I want to say, Mr. Mayor, how much I admired and appreciated your eloquence and common sense in the words you just said about the situation with the council member and planning commission member. I
Thank you.
think you hit the nail right on the head, and it was a pleasure listening to those words. So I thank you. I want to say I got the title report for the conservation easement last week, and I looked at it quickly. I got it late Friday, and I looked at it quickly, and what I'm going to do is send a copy of each of the documents to each of you, and I think you'll see that the easements that are applicable to what you're getting don't affect the town's ability to use the property for its recreational purposes as a perpetual park. And we're moving forward to for closing on that thing. It's all the pieces have come together. We've got a survey that shows only a portion of the access easement from the conservation land and the parking lot to Bird Street. And there's an unshown portion which was not platted by the surveyor. We could have the surveyor plat that portion, or we can just try to jury rig it by attaching a GIS map, which sketch, which shows the unplatted portion. Of course, I'm the lawyer, so I'm always going to say it's preferable to have, I's dotted and T's crossed, and show the meets and bounds survey of exactly where the easement is. But I'm hoping we can get by with a GIS plat. Matt, you might have some comments about that.
I'll trust your judgment on real estate closing, sir.
Well, I just got through saying if you were leaving it up to me and you had all the money in the world, I'd get the surveyor out there and have him plat the road. But the road is there, so it's not, you could always figure out where it is if a dispute arises. Literally, figuratively, it is there. And the document closing the transaction is going to provide in the deed of easement that the owner of the fee in the property, which is now Dr. Hurt, has the right to move the road at some point in the future, as long as he provides the town with adequate access. And the road, I think, if our memory is correct, will be moved at the Dr. Hurst or his successor's entitled request.
True.
So I'm pretty pleased with that situation. I've enjoyed our new interim chief of police. I haven't had the pleasure to meet the police chief that's coming on, Major Jenkins, in January, but I'm looking forward to talking to him too. I've talked to him briefly in email, and the matter that I've been talking about to you previously looks like it's proceeding. And Matt and I will let you know if we have any new developments. For Zach's side of things, I've drafted up a not quite an epistle, but certainly a more lengthy document than a warrant and debt on our first venture in moving forward to enforce the Architectural Review Board's requests for property owners in the historical district. We've hit a little glitch, but I think that's all that's going to require is a redo of a procedure, and then off we go to court, and we'll see what happens. So I'll keep you informed of that. If any member of town council have any questions about really anything, just drop me an email or give me a call, and I'm always happy to try to find the answer anyhow. I'm not saying I'll always have the answer, but I'll give it my best shot.
Mr. Bowling?
Yes, sir.
Just as a suggestion for you, if you would make sure to hold off your football practice at least a couple more weeks, if that's okay.
I think I will.
Good, thank you. Anything else from Mr. Bowling?
Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Bowling. Appreciate it.
I got quick before you go. I mean,
Okay.
I know Jim's been privy to your report. I'd just be interested to hear his comments on our recent civility and public safety and public officials issue.
Did you get that, Mr.
I did, and you'll have to translate for me, Mr. Mayor.
I can translate. Do you have any input to us on that situation?
Which situation?
The situation of Miss Lambert being harassed.
Oh, I forgot to mention that to you. I had some input with Matt on this issue about town residents versus non-resident speaking, and I put my 2 cents worth on that to Matt. And I also had some input about adopting rules of procedure for the town, and I gave some guidance to Matt on that. And I think you're going to work on that tonight, and I'm happy to help you with that as best I can. I think, as I said, I think the mayor really said more eloquently than I could what the town council's position is, and the mayor's position on really what I find and what the mayor quickly identified and correctly identified as inappropriate behavior on the parts of citizens of the town. I don't know if they're citizens or not, but certainly we all have our disagreements, and we all disagree, I'm guarantee you, about something. But at least in the town's form of government, as represented by the able town council members I see before me, we do so in a civil fashion, and we do so that with the understanding that everybody's trying their best, and the threats simply aren't tolerated. And there are certainly remedies that you can use if any of you find yourself threatened by for what you're trying to do is what you see as the best interest of the town. Excuse me. And we can involve law enforcement, and I can help you with that. But generally, I mean, my advice, and it's easy for me to put myself in your shoes when I'm not in your shoes. My advice is to just do what the mayor suggested, and that is hold your tongue as best you can. And if somebody's on your personal property or in your personal space, and he insists in making threats and whatever, just simply say, I'm not going to tolerate this, and if you continue, I'm going to have to take steps to see that you don't do this to me again.
Okay.
I don't know what you think about that, Mr. Mayor. I think that's what you're saying too.
Yeah, well, as Matt and I talked this morning, the last thing we want to do is call the police on a citizen that's not actually committing a crime, but just being a knucklehead. Okay. And you can't really arrest somebody for being stupid sometimes.
But harassment is not being knuckles.
Yeah.
No, and I think the mayor again is more eloquently drawing the line than I did. You can't, and you shouldn't. You can and you shouldn't stop somebody from being a knucklehead. But if you find yourself being harassed with late night phone calls, and all of us know the difference between intimidation and knuckleheaded behavior. At least I think you do. I know you do. And you more or less that by taking on the privilege and the honor of being a town council member, you're forced to deal with your constituency, for better or worse. But when people cross the line, I think all of you are capable of dealing with that too. And certainly I'm not saying that you take the matter into your own hands. There's certainly adequate remedies for that kind of situation if you find yourself being harassed.
Okay, let's move on, because we could talk about that for a bit longer tonight, but let's move on to Matt. Anything else you want to add at this point? Because you and Thomas are going to sort of be overseeing the rest of the meeting.
This covers it, sir. There's plenty here.
Okay, so let's go ahead with new topics and talk about our meeting tomorrow night with Albemarle County Board of Supervisors.
Yes, sir. You have a special meeting back up tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, starting a little bit earlier, as is the custom of the Albemarle County Board. We're following up on one of these joint meetings that we held about this time last year, which was the first time that the two bodies had met jointly since the summit held at Lumpkins on the occasion of the town's boundary adjustment in 1993. Since then, there have been a lot of things that the town and county have worked together on. had our disagreements that we sorted out, but from police cooperation to working on parks together, there's a lot of areas where we help each other out. So the county board is keen to talk through some more of those and see what else we can coordinate. In particular, you'll get a kind of a keynote presentation from the county's planning manager, Rachel Falkenstein, who can speak to the comprehensive plan update that's in process at the county level now for the next year and a half, probably. And we can think about how town and county land use may work together. There's a lot of areas where the county planners and inspectors help us out already, and things that we can help the county do to achieve its land use goals for commercial development, for environmental preservation, parks and recreation, all of that. We've got 2 hours booked for that. I think Rachel will probably take 20-30 minutes on her presentation. So between 6 council members and 6 supervisors, there'll be some roundtable time where everyone can speak to things on their mind about projects that they need, opportunities to work together. The playbook for the county board, if you've not watched one of their meetings, the chair tends to recognize supervisors in turn, sort of moving along the dais digitally to share thoughts and questions and reflect with each other. So that'll kind of give us some structure for that dialogue. You've got a special Zoom link sent to you, which is the participant link, separate from the spectator. So I'll be here, and if you want to sit with me on that meeting in this room, we can do that in that same setting. And this part will be open to the public, just like we're doing now. But if you'd like to join that at home or work, you can do that too. The county board, like Mr. Payne said, is still not meeting all together at the McIntyre building, so they'll be remote, and we'll have a Brady Bunch screen on for the Zoom. It might help for some of us to be together here, but you certainly don't have to. Does that make sense for the play-by-play?
The county staff actually requested if as many of us as possible could be remote, it would benefit the format.
Really?
Yes, they would, because they expect to have so many individual screens between board of supervisors and members and staff members.
Oh,
The more of us who can put a face and a name on the screen,
I see.
the easier it will be to understand who's talking and to sort of introduce ourselves and see each other.
So like if I'm here and you're there, then it gets confusing.
If we have this little camera here, we're looking at all of our faces in one big room together. It doesn't help that much to understand who we are or what it is, you know.
Can we have a vote for the most beautiful town councilor? I think we already know who that is, to be here.
So no, I don't want to say don't show up. I mean, any of you who would rather be here in person, Matt and I will be here and we'll set it up. Yeah, that request did come through.
No, I think that makes
it might
sense.
be easier for the format.
Makes sense.
You have from our last meeting with county supervisors, our punch list of requests. I don't know if they do the minutes from the meeting.
I can email that.
So that would be helpful to see beforehand.
Sure.
Because I know like some things like sort of dragging along like the comprehensive plan, getting that picked up to there.
Yep.
But it'd be helpful to just see before the meeting, what were our asks? And so we just follow on those specifically before.
Yeah, it's a good turnaround, but I'll send out an email in the morning and try to sort of summarize what it was we discussed, what we asked for, and what we've done, if I can.
Yeah.
We published something and Laura Bird got a couple of times. So
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
it's-
Yeah, a lot of the discussion focused on that sort of correspondence between planning documents, which Laura brought up at several different points throughout the year. So I think that's, yeah, we'll see the most of it, but I'll try to send that out.
Mr. Mayor, I've expressed how I feel about Zoom meetings to the board of supervisors on public occasions. I think that they're really overstepping the way that they're having the Zoom meetings when the county employees are working and the kids are back in school to choose to be. I think we we should have public meetings and using COVID as an excuse. And we're here all together.
Yeah.
So if this is a Zoom meeting, even though we could be here, I'm not going to participate.
Come on down.
Yeah, well, I'll be here, Matt will be here, Thomas will be
So
here,
I'm just
Chris will
saying
be here.
I will not be here because I think they should be having an open meeting.
Okay.
And we got one. I'm sorry, I won't.
Yeah, and I appreciate you expressing your opinion. I think that's good, Ed.
I don't want to tell everybody face to face. It's all I know is looking at the screen.
Yeah. Well, it's Zoom meetings have their place, but if you're trying to conduct a meeting and everybody starts talking over top of one another, like has happened with us because everybody's on the screen, and there's a delay in the audio, it gets really confusing after a while. You lose control real fast. So, well,
I'm just saying.
we certainly understand your position.
They're being critical, opening up every day, so they're on meeting.
Yeah.
And we invited Sarah.
So, a couple of things that we probably shouldn't bring up with them is the $100,000 deal right now. So, we're working on that quietly, and when it comes time to talk about that, Matt and I and whoever else wants to go, will go to Albemarle County and stand in front of them and tell them what we think should happen. We need to talk about that more, about what we think should happen more. And the other was the rescue squad. It's kind of quiet right now. We were thinking about maybe let's don't bring that up tomorrow night either.
Well, it's probably better,
I know. We just want to, we want to see what we can work together with them on. And if we bring up a couple of contentious items that right off the bat, it might sour the whole mood of the whole meeting. So we will do it tomorrow night and see what happens. Mr. Unsworth, rules for public input.
So this was a request of planning commission, brief discussion at their meeting after the conversation from their last public hearing about format for public engagement during regular meetings versus public hearings. And Jim, feel free to interrupt me if I misspeak here, but essentially what we have learned is that it is at your discretion to set rules of procedure for both, but best done by outlining these rules ahead of time in your rules of procedure. These were a few examples from municipalities locally and around the state who have set similar rules. You'll find these pretty much any municipality you look at. And sometimes they vary a little bit between your run-of-the-mill opportunity for public comment and public hearing. You'll get perhaps a little bit modified, fewer restrictions on public hearing, but still appropriate to do either. By putting these in your rules of procedure, all you do is set the precedent that this would follow. If there's an application or a process in front of you that is relatively mild, minimal, doesn't necessarily require the same level of decorum, it's at your prerogative to make a motion to waive those particular rules of procedure for any hearing that would deem that fit. But by having these on the books, you establish that as the expectation.
One of the things, just, do you mind, oh, you want to say something?
Yeah.
I was just going to clarify something that I think it might be helpful. Sometimes if there's a particular project that's being understood, it's helpful to know, okay, house A is next to it, or house B is 2 houses down the street, or this is a little further down the road. And I think it really does matter at times to say the proximity to the project. Then you get to a point where are they residents or not of the town, or are they 10 miles away or 50 miles away or whatever? And so those are all relevant facts. And I do think there was a big misrepresentation on that issue. And I think it is important for us to know who is where, and voices of people who are right next to a property that's an important voice, and somebody who's a few miles away is not as important voice. It just isn't. And so,
Generally, the distinction in these rules that I noticed as I was looking through a variety of localities, between when you're having public comment on an ordinary agenda item and when you're having a public hearing on a legally, mandated action that you're taking that requires that public hearing component, it is the amount of time set aside for it. In the interest of this group being able to conduct public business for the public good, in a reasonable amount of time, your regular meeting, what you normally see is these bodies set aside a small, regular chunk of time for public comment. For schedule, 10, 20 minutes on the schedule. If it's not used, you move along. If you reach the end of that comment, if you get too many people signing up ahead of time, you'll see some of these start to say, discretion will be given to residents, business owners, people who have a direct affiliation with the item on agenda. When you get to that public hearing, generally the thing that gets stretched is that time component. There's a little bit more allowance given to make sure that everybody who wants to has a chance to be heard. But in the interest of that, you still are fully allowed to say there's a limit on individual speakers, and that time cannot be passed between speakers if somebody doesn't use all of theirs. We want everyone to move through in an orderly fashion so that everyone can be heard.
the other thing I was going to say, just related to this issue, is it's not common that a location matters. Sometimes, it's very relevant to some conversations and it's irrelevant to others. Scottsville itself is a small community. We have the greater Scottsville area. We have the Emerald Necklace. So there's a lot of connections to Scottsville. There's business owners who live outside, but so at some level, we have to be reasonable that it's relevant to some conversations. It's very relevant to these conversations, but other conversations it may not be. So I think as we create it, I think there may be, I think the issue of consistency ultimately, I know Albemarle says they have a limited time, or they have and so I think there's thoughts. I don't know, Zach, thoughts you have related to that?
Consistency is important, and I've raised this before only because we as a body have been inconsistent in how we've asked for this kind of information. Like there have been times when we've done public comment when I started, where we would ask for name and address, but then because things are so small and informal often, and we typically know the person who's sitting in the public, and there's one, they just come up and speak. But I think it's a matter of, just having consistency for how we deal with public comment and for the records, we know who spoke, and I think, name and address is good, even just so we know where you are, what your relationship is to the town, especially if you're a business owner,
And in fairness, I also think if for some reason we get that, it should be protected. we're not trying to take somebody's address and get it out to everybody.
No, that's not the purpose.
No, I'm only saying that because we want to protect privacy also at the same time. As much as we want to know, we need to figure out how to protect that.
Well, once you're a public meeting, having a public hearing, and it's certainly reasonable to have people who want to address you to have a list on this as you enter, and have a sign-up list, and have somebody identify who they are and where they live. And once that's done, that's a matter of public information, and I don't think you're going to be able to restrict it.
No, but that's the other point is not just what information is provided, but when, and that's largely what the rules of procedure dictate is. Presentations are allowable if people have attached materials that they want to be able to share with you, by all means, but here's the format in which those need to be submitted. They have to go through the clerk's office X number of hours ahead of time so that the documents can be prepared and distributed. And same as the sign up sheet. If you want to make a public comment, sign up, up to this point before the meeting, or as soon as the meeting starts, whenever you say it is in your public, in your rules of procedure. But that's when the sheet gets picked up by me and comes over here. And then, we've got our people who are going to be called up to speak. And it, again, sort of controls that flow of traffic.
So what do you need us to decide today?
Nothing really today. This is just discussion for future work agenda items, I guess it would be a change if you guys deem it necessary to the rules of procedure for town council, which is something that you can draft, propose, and vote on yourselves.
Yeah, right now, your rules of procedure as a body mostly regulates how you interact with each other. Speaking order, the responsibilities of the chairman, how you run your meetings that way, and how you talk to each other on the days. It doesn't have anything about how the public talks to you. And that's unusual. Most localities have something about that say, here's the ground rules for how a public hearing works. And it might help, especially for the more complicated ones. So what we're looking for is if you're interested in cooking something up in between what Buckingham has and what Fredericksburg has, we're welcome to try to put something together for you. But right now it's a gap in your procedure.
And part of what it allows us to do is put these rules up on the website, make them publicly available, so that everyone understands coming in what the expectation is of how they're going to engage with you, interact with this forum, contribute to the amount of information being shared. And then, like I said, if the topic is such that you feel like this is unnecessary, it's entirely within your purview to make a motion to waive those rules of procedure during that particular part of the meeting.
Is this a project that Mr. Warren might undertake?
My hand's pretty full with the planning commission.
Okay.
Matters.
Yeah, I mean, these look like good models to work with, so.
Okay.
Very nice.
Sorry, this is my glasses, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Do we have what you have up there? Like, yeah, we got a paper copy of this.
No, you don't. Only,
Because you know,
I think you can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the current council document. So that would be
Sure.
clear. What's
Is that it?
necessary.
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
one thing you should keep in mind is that your rules say you're under Robert's Rules of Order for small meetings, and they're pretty flexible. And certainly you have, at any meeting, you have the right to suspend your operating rules, whatever they are. First, you make a motion to suspend the rules, and if a majority decides to do so, then you make a motion to adopt a new rule, and that's the rule for that meeting.
That's it.
So you should keep that in mind too.
And so Jim, on that same line, like absent that, like what we have now, where there's not anything specific, it lets you set different kinds of ground rules for different meetings, but that risks being inconsistent from meeting to meeting.
Right. And of course, you've got to do it on the spur of the moment. And
Maybe not. Yeah.
Suspending your rules sounds funny to start with. People say, well, what do you mean you're suspending your rules? Why are you doing that? And on and on and on. So if you've got 100 people in a room sitting there watching you as this happens, you're going to find that uncomfortable.
Okay. You think you might be able to come up with a rough draft by next week this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. We'll look forward to seeing it. Item C, the budget and compensation update.
Just to sort of always awkward talking about one's own pay. But there's been a few headlines around difficulty hiring and high turnover in local government as well as many other industries, and what happens when jobs aren't filled. The town has not had a fully staffed police department in a couple of months now, and everything else is holding steady. But I've seen a rapid adjustment in where the local government pay scales are now. My first 2 city hall jobs were in recruiting, and I never did signing bonuses. And now there's $5,000 and $6,000 signing bonuses to work at the jail. Charlottesville's starting pay for a paramedic with no training, they hire you in training, is higher than the town clerk and town administrator pay. Fluvanna's starting pay for a certified police officer, $5,000 higher for a rookie than what we're paying 20-year veterans, higher than the town administrator and the town clerk. Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission hiring a rookie planner, job that Mr. Warren could apply for right now pays more than our town clerk. This creates a risk. I really commend the service of all of our staff who appreciate being here. They like small town service, can't beat the commute. But it is competitive and we're on the wrong side of that competition. So it's just to acknowledge the risk and to acknowledge the budget resources to fix it. We're doing real well in the current budget, and we made some healthy projections that are panning out well. And I hate to play into an arms race, and I see that especially in the public safety and the health jobs. The nurse pay is just going up and up and up as they outbid each other. And the same thing is happening in firefighters and police officers. They're poaching from each other in a way that they never did before. A police officer would work 20, 30 years in one place. And now they're jumping in a way that's much more common to make $5,000 and $10,000 more. And I hate to play into that arms race, but I want to let you know that that's a risk that we've got. We're almost fully staffed now. We're down on police officers, but we're staffed in everything else. But I see it as a risk, and I don't want us to be in a place where we're suddenly shorthanded and council's asking why. Because the rest of the pay market is moving, and we're not.
One of the things, Matt, I was going to say to you, first of all, thank you for bringing it up. I realize it's awkward. But yeah, what I will say, and this gets into a lot of different issues that we have to look at, is COVID has changed the paradigm, and some actions of government have changed the paradigm. So there's a labor shortage, and because there's a labor shortage, it's changed the way that we understand how to fill that. So I do think you're correct that and I don't know, Mr. Mayor, going back to you, what the right follow-up, what is the right follow-up to that you see?
What I would ask, perhaps Matt and Thomas could do, is figure out a decent percentage increase in your compensation package and show us how we can make it work.
Okay. Next month is halfway in the fiscal year. The town does not have a tradition of Christmas bonuses, and I'm not recommending that because that's a one-time action. And I think we have a longer-term problem with that.
Yeah.
But if can I look at some
just
recommendations for budget next month?
Give us a presentation on
I mean,
what you feel is adequate or fair, and how we can make it work.
Well, and maybe, are we still going to be meeting with government services about other sort of financial long-term plans?
We had talked about trying to pull in 2 of you at a time for those meetings here, sort of between the end of October and now, and there's too much going on between the special use permits and everything else to make that a reality. But we would like to do that still. I think the current hope would probably be before February or March.
Scottsville has a trip coming up soon, but around in here and there.
We generally like to have our first draft of the budget to you, before or in April if we can. And I think the hope would be that well before we present that first draft to you, we have a chance to sit down and kind of have that broader conversation.
Because I hear you on the staff pay issue. So would it make sense to make the staff pay issue a part of that larger budgeting conversation? Or do you feel like it's a smaller?
It has an ongoing impact.
Yeah.
So to see, what does this do? How does personnel crowd out capital, for example, right? Because only use it for one thing at a time. So no, I don't mind to put those things sort of in comparison. There's a pie chart, and if you move this much of the chart, how does it move everything else? That's not hard. I can do that.
It sounds like you're talking about like pay for next year, or just like sort of like the longer term pay structure, right? Or are you talking about a mid-year change?
I'm really worried about it now, and the mid-year, at least something is doable.
Well, that was sort of where I was hoping you'd go, something that we can do now.
Yeah, the mid-year is doable within the current budget, right? But bearing in mind what does that do to the future years as well.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Can you also give us a comparison of salaries for town administrators for Russia?
Oh, sure. And that does have a population base. Being candid about my own, it has a lot to do with population and cost of living. And I'm not complaining, but by any means.
No, understood. I'm just trying to just give us some context.
Sure.
Okay. Item D, the recommendations that the planning commission came forward with at their last meeting. You need to say more about that.
I'd like to give Mr. Waring the floor on some background and also help with council members who haven't seen this kind of process before. What are you looking at, and what does it mean when a special use permit recommendation comes in? So in getting ready for what I know will be a healthy debate and a complicated decision, an important one. Let me set this in just a little bit of context. I really appreciate the research that you've got to kind of get me out of the weeds on this and back up to the big picture. Which one? One of them first, or?
Yeah, first.
Okay.
First.
You got it, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to take a look at comprehensive plan for Scottsville and what it starts with. And I understand, maybe a while since we looked at it, or we might need a refresher of how we're looking at it through the context of this special use permit. So that's kind of what I'm kind of hoping to get across. And I'll start with the Bird Street development. These are some pictures that I took the other week, just as a refresher of the lot, which is on the bottom right, the lake that's there, and then the street as well. Because I know the narrow street has been a concern that's been raised. So that's kind of, I drive an orange Prius, and I'm taking up that much of the road in a small orange Prius. So just kind of some context for what we're talking about. And you can go to the next slide. So both the Bird Street property is, as you all know, has been rezoned village residential. No longer transformative mixed use. And the reasoning for switching over to that is to allow for more development, housing development in that area. There's some verbiage on there about what is allowed within village residential, encouraging compact development, and encouraging residential development in areas of the town designated as village residential. Let's see. What was that?
Just a question. How
Yeah.
many houses by right are to fit on the space that they're proposing?
By right, Matt can remind me of this, 13, I believe.
0.7 is the
0.7.
density,
Right,
and the acreage is
there's 9 acres.
9.
Right, so
13.
13 on that lot, yeah. Yeah, so that's by right. I think on the next slide, there's a breakdown of right, we'll get to it. The property also falls under a small area plan for the West Downtown small area plan. There are some pieces of that which the small area plan emphasizes, one of which is walkability. I'm sure as you're familiar, the developer has proposed trails and park area around the lake, and that really speaks to the small area plan as far as wanting to create a network of trails around the town. It speaks specifically to connecting the end of the Levee Walk to Valley Street, and from my take, this development provides a lot of more walkable space for people in the town. You can see on this is a snapshot from part of the small area plan. The bubble in the top left says housing opportunity. That's exactly the parcel that we're talking about in the Bird Street development as a housing opportunity. Let's see what else I have on this. We can go on to the next slide. So this is more talking about the comprehensive plan. It's important to note as well that when we're talking about the affordability of these houses, I did a little bit of research on that from census information from 2015 to 2019. It showed the median home value of an owner occupied housing unit as $356,000. Those aren't new builds. Those are houses that are occupied in Albemarle County from a span of 4 years. And yes, that's before COVID, where the housing market has taken a turn. But this is just some verbiage as well from the comprehensive plan that it encourages developers to phase in proposals of large scale development, such as at the factory site. So it specifically points to the factory site as an area. And Matt, you're welcome to jump in at any point.
Just that these words are visionary. These are your comp plan goals. And this page isn't statistics. The words of character, healthy, opportunities, order, quality of life, those are subjective. And that really gets to the limit of what planners can recommend. That's your judgment call. Is what's before you healthy? Does it fit? Is it in keeping with character and the vision of what you want to do? We can answer a lot of the technical questions, but this really gets to the heart and soul of the community. And that's the judgment call that you have to make. We can gather information and we can kind of put it in context, but we can't answer that question.
Right. This is the goal I want to get to you all is for you to have a good understanding of the comp plan and the small area plan, so that you can make those decisions going forward with more context as far as what the documents provide. Speaking more to the affordability issue and such that's been raised, comprehensive plan does point to being able to promote affordability of home ownership, working with Habitat for Humanity. I included some pictures of examples Habitat for Humanity has built some of those homes in the last few years. It felt like that was a good idea to throw in some context as what we could see if we worked with them. Other organizations like the Albemarle Housing Improvement Project. I have a slide. You can go ahead. Speaking more to the pedestrian safety, there's a general sense that if you promote more pedestrian activity, that area will become a higher traffic area for pedestrians, and there's a natural effect that drivers will learn to slow down in those areas, knowing that there are pedestrians in that area. I took a picture of this is in Ix Park in Charlottesville. That's an open street there, which has been closed for the farmers market, but it's a good example of something that can happen if you have enough pedestrian activity that can create a safer environment for pedestrians just on the presence alone. I also included one of the developers' pictures of the parks, the park and trails connection within that parcel, and how it can easily incorporate itself into the trails that are already present in the town. I had a great opportunity to bring this up to one of my professors, Tom Jacobson, who's worked for Chesterfield County for the last 20 years. He specialized in economic redevelopment. I caught him up on the special use permits that we've been looking at lately. And he sees those trails and parks as a huge benefit to the town. He noted that the developer seems to be making a lot of generous offers with this plan to include those pedestrian connections. He took note of the traffic congestion and noted that it overall is not a major concern. He noted the narrowness of the street, but he's looking at it, I guess, from a larger picture. But he thought that overall the development was a great opportunity for attracting young families or couples with no kids to settle in Scottsville. And we discussed a little bit the effects that this would have on the school, Scottsville school, that it might bring in more kids to the school. So those were kind of his thoughts on it. I'm happy to try to answer any questions I can on this. That's what I got on this one. Yeah. That's it for Bird Street.
I have some questions.
Sure.
And things we're just to discuss. The recommended density from planning commission was 36 units on that, which is 3 units per acre, which is consistent with density in other parts of town, including up on High Street, including out East Main Street, including on Page and Harrison. So it's a similar density to what we have in our town, which is encouraging. That's 36 units. Town staff recommended 42. And so planning commission recommendations come in a little under that. I know we're talking about a mix of multi-units and single family detached. All the units will be detached. But I do suggest, and I would like the council to consider on the balance leaning towards more single family detached. And I say that, so like between 15% and detached. Oh, that's in it. Yep. That looks good. And I want to emphasize that because those are people who are here to make an investment, commitment in the town. We're talking earlier tonight about volunteers and trying to get people in government to serve their town. Town runs on people who are committed to this place. The people who make an investment in a property like that place are those kinds of people. Few are on services, talking about fire and rescue, talking about school, talking about transportation, services. That will get people's attention. The county is not going to help us out. There will be more time to help us if we have more numbers down here. And in relation to our own budget, part of the sales tax that we get in this town comes from the number of school-age children that we have in the town limits.
Sure.
So it's important even from a budgetary standpoint that we just have housing that accommodates families. So those numbers look right to me. A couple other questions I have though about other conditions. One is, I know people have asked questions about the character of structure. We don't know who's building. We don't have any control over who builds in town. All we do is design. If because it's a special use permit, if it's not by right, is there a way to put contingencies on it that buildings must have ARB approval? I know people are interested in characteristics of what's built. The structures themselves aren't. But I don't know if we can because it's not inside the ARB or inside the historic overlay.
I think with what the developer has talked with us about, do they still do like an artist rendition? All I'm looking at is like a Google here.
Yeah.
An artist rendition of what we're talking about would mean a lot to me.
I can give you examples of what's being built and
That's not what
selling.
I'm asking.
I know,
for.
I know.
I'd like to see an artist rendition. Here's Bird Street, here's
Yeah.
a proposed development.
Mhm.
I don't care what they put in Fredericksburg.
Yeah. This applicant's not the carpenter.
Yeah.
That they're gonna build a road and stub some lots and then sell them to a carpenter. So we don't know who's gonna lay those shingles. And they can't promise you what it's gonna look like.
Whether he sells them to Ryan Homes or Southern Homes or Habitat for Humanity will make a big difference as to what the house that gets built on the land looks like. But he's not gonna commit to selling it to any developer at all until he's got a lot to sell, which isn't until after the special use process goes through.
So to that point,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I mean, so to that point, is there a contingency that we can ask for architectural review board approval or consultation if something's not being built by right outside the store overlay district?
I'll find out. I'm not sure on that one. It's an extra level of control, like make it like it was in the historic district, except it's not.
You would have to make it into the historical district to do that, because your state enabling legislation is all tied to the State Enabling Historical District Act.
So that's something we could control, change our historic district boundaries,
That's right.
and that would be the way to do that.
Well, you'd have to, not factors here. It's not in the historical district now, correct?
It's not now.
All right, well, you could make it in the historical district for this, that, and the other reason.
Right.
But until you do that, then you're not going to tie into the ARB standards and so forth, to answer Zach's question.
Well, thank you.
I can tell you, here's a new build. It's one of the last new lots in Lake Monticello. Lake Monticello is almost full. It's pretty rare to find a new build under 300,000. This is one. Small side, but still a fair number of bedrooms. It gets you to that working family, and it's affordable. And the commute on 53 is maybe a little more congested than the commute on 20, but this will sell easily when it finishes.
One of the things, if you all might give me a few minutes, I'd like to speak back to what you said, and I'd like to also make a few comments about our overall situation. I'm speaking to my town councilors here. When we think of the town of Scottsville, when we think of who we are as a town, for our town to survive, we have to grow. For our town to thrive, we have to grow. Some people, when they think of the town, they think of the town in reference to the past. In fact, this is my little symbol here of the past. This is actually, today's the 9th anniversary of my father passing away. And if my dad were here today, he would be cracking me over the head, speaking to you all right now, and simply say, Scottsville's got a great past. Scottsville's got a checkered past. Good things and bad things from our past. But it's the past. And we want to remember those things. We want to think of those things. And some people, when they think of this town, they think of the past. Other people, when they think of the town, they think of now. This is a map of our town. And when they think of now, we've got some great things happening right now. We had a terrible thing happen. In fact, it really makes me quite upset about what happened to our fellow town councilor. And to be honest with you, it added clarity to my thinking on this issue, specifically to this issue. And I will say to you that some people think about the now, but we as a town need to think about the future. We've got to think about the future. It's not about the now. It's not about this moment. It's about the future. This past weekend, I was down on the soccer fields in Scottsville. And as I was down there, it was heartwarming to me. Actually, for 13 years, I was a soccer coach down there and overlapped with some of my time on the town council. All 6 of my kids played soccer here in Scottsville. And as they played soccer here in Scottsville, we got to know the young families here. We got to be down there with the other families and be with them. In fact, it was kind of fun being down there. A couple of the kids I coached are now coaches. One of the kids that I coached, in fact, was my greatest honor, told me some years ago that he wanted to run for town council, and that was Josh Peck. And as I remember him as a youngster, to see him want to give his service to this town, to actually grow up as a kid in this town, to want to serve here in this town, to me, I couldn't be more proud of that and to have done that with Josh. And I will say, when I was looking around the soccer field this last Saturday, and as I've done the last few weeks, I don't know a lot of these young families. A lot of these young families that are here in Scottsville that come and play in the soccer field, these kids running around town, these decisions that we need to make, these need to be made for those kids. It's not about the past, it's not about the now, it's about these kids. How do we create a Scottsville where a little kid who's playing with one of these right now, that they will grow up in a town that they can play soccer in, they can play basketball in, they can go swim in the river, they can go and they can play around here, they can be at Scottsville Elementary, Boys and Girls Club. My fellow town councilors, when we think about this development, there's gotta be houses for those people to live in. There's gotta be houses for those young families to come here. I don't per se to say that I know the right number, but I will tell you, it's growing in my conviction, we need a fair amount of them so that they can have a place to live. This town, if this town is gonna grow, it's great about the past, it's great about the now, but it's gotta be about the future. We have got to think about the youngsters, we've got to think about the kids. It can't be about people saying, oh, there's too many cars, there's too much this, or my house is there. Honestly, we need to think about those kids. We need to think about what do they want for the future? What can we give them? What can we pass on to them? The decisions that we make as we pass some of these things that come forward here in the coming months, or as we debate them. We can expect heavy opposition, of course, but at the same time, we've got to do the right thing for the families of these around here. We've got to make a welcoming community, because if this town is going to grow, it's going to be because they come, because they stay. It's because, and I will say this to you too, of my 6 kids, all 6 of my kids had their first part-time jobs in Scottsville. One of them had their first full-time job here. My hope is the kids that grow up in Scottsville, the kids that are maybe not even born yet, will want to be in this town in the future. And the decisions we make are for them. Again, it's not about the now, it's not about all this stuff, it's about the future. So I'm just simply saying to you all, let's look beyond some of the things we're debating right now. We're missing the picture. We've got to think about the long term. We've got to think about 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. When we do that, we'll make the right decisions. We will make the right decision. We won't please everybody in the process. But if we're going to grow as a town, we need them. We need them. And if we have that kind of a town, the rest of us will want to live there. If we have that kind of a town where they want to be, we'll want to be there. And if they're not here, we won't want to be there. If we don't create the kind of town, and this goes back to what I said before that Matt said. Fellow town councilors, there are dramatic changing dynamics out there right now. You all see them, everything that's happening with COVID. These things are unprecedented. Now, I'm not talking about just that we're wearing something like this. I mean the changes in the way business is done, the changes in the way education is happening, the changes in where people live and the opportunities. It's a different world. It's going to be a very different place. You're going to make a big mistake as a town if we don't understand that. We're positioned in a really good place. We've got such a beautiful, and just so I say this to those who have different opinions, I'm not trying to force anything on anybody, but I'm simply saying to you, it's the time to move forward. I asked actually before the meeting tonight, could anybody identify when the last house was built in Scottsville? Nobody had an easy answer to that. I mean, I've been on the council. If you want to look at the statistics, we're losing population. If you want to look at the statistics, we haven't built new places. So that being said, I know we're into numbers and figures, and I'm glad that we have great plans. I'm glad that we have a robust debate as a community, wherever you're from in the debate. But we got to move forward. We've got to create places for these young families or whoever it is. And we need to be inclusive, whoever wants to come. We want to have a town that's available for everybody. If you look back at the history of this town, when people moved here in the 1700s and the 1800s, they came here because it was something where they could thrive and live. That's why they came. And today, we have a chance to be a part of that again. Let's be.
Excuse me.
Thank you. Dan?
I have one more question about the bird trees. Yes. Is there an HOA? I heard there's an HOA. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What does the HOA do? And the more important question, I guess, is how does it relate to town government and services?
I might punt some of this to Mr. Bowling if he's still on. I have not.
Still here.
Thank you, sir. What we heard from our applicant is the main thing that HOA would do is maintain the stormwater system. There's drainage features, which are not going to be public infrastructure, the water and sewer pipes, the gas lines, but they've got drainage features that need to be maintained, and that's not the town's responsibility. So the HOA fundraises for that. At the bare minimum, they do that.
Great.
sewer?
Drainage, not the pipe coming out of your house, but where the rainwater goes.
Well, if the HOA takes care of that and they decide, or someone decides there's no HOA, who takes care of it?
There's almost assuredly going to be an HOA for a subdivision that has modern financing and wants to be able to finance loans. So if you're talking about how big is the community you're talking about here is 12 houses, 20 houses, whatever, to get the financing so the developer will know the builder will buy the lots. The builder's not going to buy the lots unless he can get a construction loan. In turn, he's not going to buy the lots if he knows that he can't get the people who buy those homes to get conventional financing.
So Jim, it's a consequence of the way that the commercial real estate comes together to build anything like this. That if you've got a road and storm drains, you'll have that HOA at the very least to maintain the storm drains, right?
Well, yeah, because the developer certainly doesn't want to maintain them, and the county will either require the developer or the ultimate lot owners to maintain those drains.
Right.
And the other thing, the developer is almost certainly, again, I'm not the developer, but I've seen enough of these. I haven't seen a subdivision built recently that doesn't have a homeowners association and restrictive covenants. And you're going to probably see an ARB board that's going to govern design criteria in that particular subdivision for such things as, oh my, what kind of fence you can put up, what your outbuilding has to look like, down to what color you can paint your house, on and on and on and on.
They might do that on their own, but the town's ability to say, hey, we as neighbors, we care what color these houses are. HOA, would you please handle that for us? We might not be able to do that.
Well, no, because that's, what the town can do is what's allowed for the town to do in historical districts, and by creating an ARB under specific state legislation, which is what the town has in its current ARB.
Right.
So they can regulate historical buildings, and they can regulate the quality of that building and the paint color if it's always been red, and for some reason somebody wants to paint it pink, on and on. But also, you're going to have, for regulating these subdivisions, some sort of mechanism, a homeowners association with a officer structure and a little mini government, if you will.
Yeah.
And you'll have bylaws that governs how the board meets and so forth. But there's a lot of people in this world that refuse to live in a community with a homeowners association. That's why they want their little mini farm out in the sticks. But if you're going to be selling these commercial lots, these kinds of houses, you're going to have a declaration and bylaws regulating the community for all sorts of things.
And Jim, this was actually one of the points that the Planning Commission spent the most time debating on at their meeting last week. They struck this commitment in the conditions that the town be the one responsible for maintaining parks and trails, because they weren't sure whether that was something that rightly belonged with a future HOA, that we want public access to the trails, but they were worried about maybe the town budget impact on maintaining these things.
If the town maintains them, then all these people asking to appear in the town council, you have a duty to maintain this, just like you do the flood protection structures, and you get in there and do it.
Right.
So you're worried about that, but you can put that burden on the citizens of the community. Now, if the town doesn't like it, and if the town has an easement across those trails, with giving the town the right to maintain the trails to whatever condition it wants to, if it wants to, then the town can step in and do it. But otherwise, you can sit back and let the homeowners association cut the grass on the things.
Are we in a fair spot of have your cake and eat it too, if we require that trails be available to the public, but also require that an HOA maintain them? So
Well, that gets a little tricky.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, see, you're dedicating property public use, but you can get the developer usually to agree to do that, which the one, didn't I hear something that's what the planner who talked earlier said something about that they put this in their plans. Am I
Yeah.
wrong, right?
That feels like one of the bargaining chips here of who's going to pay. Will the maintenance of these trails be something that the HOA sorts out, or will that cost be spread among
Well, you
the whole
can,
town tax base?
no, you can put the maintenance, you can't put the maintenance on the homeowners association. You can just give the town the trail, but you can give the town the right to maintain it, and you can have an agreement with the developer, because the developer is going to want to have a tidy community, and he doesn't want to, his only goal is to sell these lots to builders, and the builder's only goal is going to be to sell the houses they build on to homeowners, but they want to do that efficiently. And so the selling point is that you'll move into a community where you'll know that there's a structure already in place to maintain the amenities of the community, be it a clubhouse, swimming pool, trail, or be it a burden like these fancy, so-called very expensive stormwater drainage facilities. Best management practices stormwater drainage facilities is what they're called. BMPs, that's probably a good sound for them.
Yeah.
They're very expensive. I could tell you the horror stories. I mean, I won't get it. That's not relevant here, but now all of a sudden the state passed the Stormwater Drainage Act, and the county passed one, and everybody's required to comply with it. It's just an extremely expensive device. And it's designed to hold water and preserve the environment and so forth, but it's because there's no unifying master plan for stormwater drainage. I'll describe it as piecemeal for whatever that's worth. But in any event, you're going to have, this community is not just going to exist if the guy is building anything other than Quonset hut Butler building like structures, barracks, if you will, at the lowest cost possible. And it doesn't sound like that's what these homes are. They have a market in mind.
Well, I guess, so in terms of.
We get all that?
Is that an answer?
I guess what we have to decide is if, and I don't know, Matt, you similarly feel like tentative about this too, is if we give the HOA, punt the responsibility to maintain things like trails to the HOA, that those won't then actually be publicly accessible. Potentially.
I would worry about a future HOA saying, hey, we're the ones paying for this, we're going to restrict access to it. Or,
but they can't do that if the town has a right of way over it that runs the benefit of the town. So they can restrict it all they want.
Right, the question is if that's not a condition.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, Jim. If we require public access and easements across the trails and things, can we trust that this HOA is going to do a halfway decent job of maintaining them, so that when residents walk on them?
I've learned you can't really trust anything for much more than 10 years, but you can try. You can assume that the people that are in the town now, by and large, the great majority of them want to have tidy homes with neat appearance, and they like the amenities of the community around them to be neat also.
Yep.
I feel like it's worth saying you're not on as tight of a schedule as Planning Commission to come to any decision on this. You have more flexibility than they did to go back and forth with the developer and discuss these conditions and what you want to do with that. Planning Commission is legally required within 90 days of receiving that application to turn around and make a recommendation on it. You're receiving that recommendation here tonight for the first time. Your next procedural step would be to call for a public hearing, but you're not on a 90-day time frame as they were to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation. So you can take more time if you feel it appropriate to continue to chew on these and come to something,
Yeah, but I think there are some time deadlines on town council. They don't have the ability to receive a zoning application and then sit on it.
Correct, right. Not indefinitely.
Well, that's good to know. What is our timeline then?
What I would,
What I was going to suggest is that at next Monday's meeting, we receive the recommendation of the planning commission. And we tentatively schedule a public hearing for James. And give us everybody a couple more months to work on it, accept suggestions from the public. You know, you don't have to have a public hearing to accept suggestions from the public. Certainly welcome to email, come by, talk to you on the street if it's in a civil manner. And
I have a question. We're looking at a special use permit that was submitted by a developer. It goes to the planning commission, and it suggests 7 amendments to this. So if we say we do not want to accept this, we go right back to where we were, for 12 hours. But since we are thinking about making amendments to it, would the developer have to resubmit another?
No, you have the last word on these conditions. So planning commission, the choices are, they got this application. They always have the by right option, like you said. They're asking for above that. Council's options are deny the whole thing. So all they can do is the by right. Approve the whole thing with no conditions, or slice and dice these conditions lots of different ways.
And you're not required to send it back to the planning commission just because your ultimate decision disagrees with the planning commission's points, because they're not binding on you. They're only recommendations as a matter of law. They're recommending these things to you.
Should have another public meeting.
Yes, the public hearing has to happen before a council vote.
So both bodies are required to hold that public hearing for planning commission and town council. The planning commission is always serving an advisory role in this process. So any recommendation they think town council can be accepted, modified, or, you know, changed, rejected as town council sees fit. And that's what you all did. The zoning recommendations, for instance, where they had recommended that let's not go through with town council vote, you know, what they do. You could take these conditions as they have been passed through town council. I'm sorry, take these recommendations as they've been, these conditions as they've been recommended to the planning commission, modify them as you see fit, remove them as you see fit. Your choices.
Well, we voted, what was it, last year to change the density requirement? And yeah, change the zoning and to allow 12 homes on it. Now we've got a developer that wants to put in 48 on the same area. How do we miss it? I mean, in essence, is it the developer doing the rezoning for?
It's both. So that village residential rezoning allows both of those things. It creates the by right that you can buy this land and do this on it with nobody's permission except the building inspector.
Right.
Or if you think you've got a better idea, you can apply for the special permission. And if town council thinks that that's a good idea, they have the power to go up. But if you don't think that the special use permit is justified, then you say no, special use permit denied, and all they can do is the by right. The by right sets a baseline, and the special use permit sets a ceiling. And everything within this range is negotiable. Because last year, before the rezoning, it was industrial, and there were no houses there.
Right.
Now we're at 12, and we're in this zone of 12 to 48. Where do you want to be? Planning Commission's recommendation was 36.
And that zone is variable. The chart that got modified in the village residential zoning ordinance had, as Matt described, the by right allowance, allowable with special use permit not on public sewer and water, and an allowable with special use permit on public sewer and water. And so the cluster development ordinances, the cluster development allowances there are both by special use permit. And so what they're applying for here is with access to public sewer and water, which allows for the most density. But as Matt described, that conventional development is the by right use that would be allowed. So we did change both, but that higher density, they were always gonna have to come and go through this process.
I gave the example of planning commission of how these conditions could be sliced and diced. If you heard from the public of, we actually don't care about native plants and we want Japanese maples and Siberian elms, then you just take the native plants condition away and now you can have whatever kind of landscaping you want from all over the world. But you get to decide whether the native plants are important. And if you don't think they're important, you just take that condition out.
Yeah, I just like to follow up on what Eddie was saying. I was a big proponent of rezoning this because I think we need to grow, and thank you, Councilor. Let's go for explanation of that. I think that 13 houses on that full area, plot area is about right. That fits what the other neighborhoods surrounding there, neighborhoods are. I'm not necessarily opposed to increasing that somewhat, but what this developer is proposing is 3 times the number of houses on half the land out there. Still has the other half of Bird Street that they can do something. Now, there's some discussion about what could be put out there because of the groundswell, but the fact remains that more can be put out there. So this feels to me like the developer is asking an awful lot and not giving us anything back. What is the town going to get from this special permit beyond a lot more people? And I think what we've heard is from everyone here that we don't want to be like Crow's Edge. And if I imagine walking up and down the street on this plan, it's going to look like Crow's Edge. And the developer is proposing out on Glen Road the same kind of thing. And that's just the start. There's another 200 acres out there that they could jam a similar number of houses on. So I, in 20 years, don't want to be living in a town where there's hundreds of houses over on one side and there's another 50 or 60 on the side up here. That to me feels like not the kind of place that Scottsville is, more the kind of place that anybody wants to live in. I would be surprised if the kids growing up in this town want to live in that kind of density as well. They do, and there's nothing wrong with that. They can go to Crozet, they can go to Charlottesville, they can go to Route 20 south of Charlottesville. But I think if we're going to consider increasing density at this kind of exponential rate, I want some kind of exponential benefit to the town. And what I'm seeing here is not that level. And I would like to really send that message to the developer that I'm not just going to be that I do not propose and support the rezoning so that we can have a lot of houses jammed in our place. And that's to me what this feels like.
Well, I will say Crozet is thousands of homes, and what's currently being proposed is 46 total. I think we're looking at 54 homes.
Yeah.
Between 2 properties. That's not very many.
That's a lot.
And what I'm saying, well, look at the density up on the Bloodhound there.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the 20, if you look at 24 homes, it's 0.375 acres. That's the exact same density that's in the adjacent neighborhood.
That's also, what I would like to see there is a plan for that entire 200 acres. I don't want to be.
He's talking about Bird Street.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, Bird Street, I did, the Bird Street, 36 units, 3 units per acre. I mean, that's a very comparable density in downtown.
On Bird Street?
So you see on East Main Street.
That's true, but it's not what you see up in Harris.
Those properties are half acre lots. Where do they have? So I'm saying that it's not radically different. And I think if we're talking about residents, if we're talking about numbers of people, we're just not talking about crazy numbers of people. And we're not the Crozet argument, it's not Crozet style development, we're just not gonna hit those numbers.
I'll see if I can, this has been a long conversation that's had a lot of iterations of negotiation, starting from our small area plan process and working all the way through here. And I'll see if Matt and I can, as we go forward from this, before you guys have your public hearing, find some way to sort of consolidate and present some synopsis of that, what's now been the better part of a 3-year conversation, because we started with conversations with, the same engineers who are representing this application were part of our small area plan process and discussing removed from an application what the people they work with typically look at as walkable, not busy, not dense neighborhoods. And the number that got thrown out early in the process was in that 8 to 12 units per acre. So that, there's been a great deal of negotiation and a great deal of accommodation to the concerns of the community that's moved that needle before the application landed on the table. And then as Matt presented here tonight, you can sense with that working through that.
Stuart, one thing I want to say to challenge what you just said.
Yes.
So to disagree with you, thinking that there should be more, which would be, and this is not necessarily throwing the number, it's more the sense of, if you said the kids wouldn't care, first of all. The kids would have no opinion whatsoever. What is the question isn't the kids there. The question is, what would mom and dad want to live in? What would mom and dad want to buy? How does that fit into our town, which is a very different thing? And where is the market going in terms of what the demand is? I mean, everything is supply and demand. So when we think of what we create here in Scottsville, if we are going after like a much older demographic, then we're probably not in the best place, because you want to be near a hospital. If you're going for a younger demographic, then you are in a place where we have great outdoor resources. And you would go back to maybe to kind of what Zach was saying is, so the planning commission themselves took the 44, turned it into 36. And these guys were kind of saying it's between 13 and 36 at the moment, so to speak, in that range. The question is not so much what we think is the right number. I mean, ultimately, we will vote on it, and we want everybody's input on it. But it's, if we think of what are we trying to do, and I'll go back to what I was saying with my little thing here. If we're trying to create a place that is welcoming to a demographic that we have historically, right now, we're cut off from that demographic. It's just true. So we've made a mistake in the past as a town to not work on that specifically. So if we think about what we're doing, that may dictate this answer, whether it's 27, 49, 10,000 or whatever. And I'm throwing a number out there, but I'm being for real to say, if we decide, okay, our way forward is to really understand the demographic that we're after. And I say demographic, it may be, a couple, a single person, whatever, but generally going back to that point of children, that in itself, I think, will help answer the number. It's not, to me, it's not the streets, it's not the people yelling and screaming, all that stuff. I don't care. What I care about is making a decision that's based, it's the right decision with the issue of how it fits and what are we trying to do. And that's a discussion that's much bigger than us. That is a discussion that everybody needs to be involved in, and hundreds of people need to have an opinion on. But ultimately, I think it's gonna, whether it's 23 or 14 or 19 or 27 or whatever, it'll be, I think it'll be natural in that process.
Yeah, that's when I look at the map, and I think about what would the town what would we like the town to look like in 20 or 30 years in that space? So, yeah, we absolutely need to increase the number of people. We've got this huge palette that we can keep on. We can make this town the way we want it to be. And what I'm concerned about is the spot zoning bits and pieces of it to be really dense without thinking about how do we spread that across all of us? How do we encourage? Yeah, so how do we get the number of people that we want in the town spread out over this area in a way that, you know, maximizes the character that we already have? And I'm just not sure that a lot more density out on Glenham is going to be the right way to do that. Now, I think more density in town is a good idea. I just don't like the idea of fully.
Oh, sure, and this is, what we're gonna be talking about in the next 2 months.
But
yeah.
I'm making this point for, I'm exaggerating. So let's look at, what I'd like to do is look at this, at the whole town area that we have to work with and figure out what do we want that to look like? And let's think about that in terms of how we're spot filling pieces.
Great points.
Do you have comments on Blenheim Road?
I do.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Blenheim Road.
Similar presentation, a lot of it falls under the same, of course, yeah, it's additionally village residential does not fall under the small area permit, so there's not those other pieces to it. But the proposed development is on 9 acres of 146 acres. So a part of a much larger parcel.
Yeah.
If you can go to the next slide, I think that shows that. Yeah. So that orange area is the proposed development of the 146 acres. There's additional trails that have been proposed within that buffer in between the existing development to the north. And it's a small piece of a much larger acreage. I believe the current iteration of the special use permit with recommendations has 18 houses proposed on that development within those conditions. 5 right in that. I believe there were 8.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yes. When I showed this same proposal to Thomas Davidson, and his take on it was that he immediately was very curious about what the developer's plan was, or the owner's plan was for the rest of that parcel.
Sure.
He wanted to learn what the overall goal was for that. So that's kind of the information that I have. It does contribute to the pedestrian walking paths that we could see, connecting to the area. But other than that, it's the main takeaway is that it's a very small piece of a larger pie.
Yep. Okay. The other area of village residential zoned land goes like this. And then we have the green on that map, Dan, our lowest density is the residual. And you're right, it's been a long time since we've attempted any master planning, so it's hard to say anything about what goes here, except that special use permits are case by case. So if you approve the one and then they come back for another phase, there's no precedent. They could keep applying for more and you keep voting them down.
Yeah. Man, I'm not sure if there's another slide. Yeah.
It's the same zoning.
Right.
On the 2 places, and the applications are pretty similar.
The other thing that was noted, the other thing that was noted by Tom Davidson was this opening at the end of the cul-de-sac. There's no houses proposed in that lot. There's an opening, and what Mr. Jacobson alluded to is that there's a potential for that street to continue. since there's no proposed houses to be developed in that area. That's something to keep in mind as well, that road could, the infrastructure proposed is there.
In my experience with the owner, and I haven't been here that long, but I started off volunteering with the planning commission, and I have never seen the landowner come with a plan that had a small number of houses. So I can only project that he has plans to do this with all of the rest of that. So what I would like, encourage us to do is to think about what we would like to see in the rest of that area. And look at this as a part of this larger piece. And to me, the village residential current zoning is a good way to start with what I'd like to see on the rest of it. Unless, we as a town get something radically beneficial out of giving that away, I'm having trouble justifying.
I kind of want to agree with you. I mean, I know technically there's no precedent, but if you're talking about 146 acres and we're saying yes to 18 houses on 9 of these acres, what happens with the other 137? It's inevitably just time after time, like even if it's in 9-acre increments going to be put in front of us. Technically, there's no precedent, but there is. Like once we approve these 18 houses, and I know Zach, you were saying it's thousands of houses in Jose and everything. But this kind of sounds like cookie cutter suburbs, which is not what Scottsville is. And it's not what, maybe this actual special use permit is gonna be. But after the 9th, 10th, 11th special use permit on these 146 acres, I really feel like it's gonna be, like when you were talking before about the homeowners association.
Yeah.
With the clubhouse and the pools and I am inclined to agree that these are high numbers for these areas. And I'm also inclined to say that Scottsville absolutely needs growth and not against that, but
Yeah, we're not getting something really substantial back.
Yeah, so Jim, have you done much with the new proper law lately? We have lost the ability to simply require cash.
That's right. We can't ask for money anymore. It's pretty complicated. And you're going to need whatever you ask for to support by infrastructure needs.
Right. So you have an example of a condition like that, and
well, you're going to need to spend some serious money to get somebody to develop a profit plan for you.
Yeah. We got
not $10,000.
hang on, put this back. Why are my words on my stuff?
I mean, there's profit plans that have been submitted to the county recently. I'm trying to think of one. Most of these are way small in scope of what you're going to find in the county.
Yeah, that's like
these are just little piddly things, and you're not going to find much in the way of master plan development and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you've got a big example in Albemarle where they approve a couple thousand houses and the developer gives a piece of land for an elementary school.
Yeah.
Next elementary school, here's a free piece of land. You still have to pay for the school, but your land for the school is paid for. The homes get a neighborhood school. So there's a connection between, excuse me, Jim, there's a connection between, we know all these kids are going to be here, they're going to need the school, here's your land for the school. We've got a little baby version of that on Bird Street, where there's going to be a gap in our sidewalk between the Target property and the library, 800 feet where there's no sidewalk. We want to connect the dots on that sidewalk. The developer does not have to build us a sidewalk because they say that's public infrastructure, it's for everybody. What they are willing to do, and we've agreed on this as one of the commission recommendations from the planning commission, is they'll design the sidewalk for us. Maybe $30,000 worth of engineering, and give us a set of blueprints that we can then use to apply for VDOT grant funding or work with the county on help building a sidewalk and use our blueprints and say, this is what we want to build. So they're offering us $30,000 worth of engineering, which is maybe not the scale of get that you're looking for, but that's the back and forth that's in play.
And what you just
Right,
talked
right,
about,
right.
Matt, is what you can legally do.
Say again, sir?
What you just talked about is what you can legally do now.
Well, thank you.
Okay, any more on Blenheim?
No, and I think this big picture, though, I think we're gonna talk a lot about density, and I like the density that came forward in the recommendations, and I think especially downtown, up the Birch Street lot, generally should have more density closer to our downtown.
That's it.
And so it fits with our neighborhoods, we've seen the pictures in our comprehensive plan, people who move downtown want to be able to walk. You know, they want density, that's why I move downtown, I want density, small lot, and whatever. And so I think when we're looking at downtown properties, I think we need to think about that's the place to emphasize our denser housing.
So another concern that I have about the Birch Street was, what's gonna happen to the. There could be more houses put down. If the developer wants to, I don't know if we can put some sort of limit on what happens to that, or.
So can,
Well, again, every SUP would be
sure.
independent and
I'm
non.
sure, but even if by the right, they could still add another.
What's the acreage over there?
8.
8, so they could have 12 houses.
Oh, that's a little house, so-
so we've got some special use permit, like how many acres is the 8?
No, 8 is the remainder. It's about 19 acres overall. They're asking for an SUP that applies to 11 or 12 acres there.
Yeah, but split the parcels yay big, and it continues to run south and west of this pond. This is steeper land, it's harder to build on. It would be more expensive and it would be harder. They're definitely looking at efficiency, proposing where it's already clear and flatter. I think it would be tricky to extend the road around this way. The land is rougher. It could be done, but it would be more challenging and more expensive.
So the developer would be willing to donate that land to the town, or to agree not to develop on that, the rest of that, then this doesn't, then that makes this doesn't.
Yeah, it's true.
The trails, because it connects up with our. So if he's not willing to do something like that, that suggests to me that he's got some more plans for it, and that the plans that I have seen come out of engineering, they have been very high density.
That conversation was had at the planning commission level. They asked if that would be an acceptable condition, and there was hesitance coming back from the applicant. Right.
I would be if I was.
Right, that, hey, they admitted what Matt described, that there are challenges to being able to build there that made it not their first choice to do so, but they were hesitant to rule out the, possibility of future. But yeah, as Matt says, now we go through this again, and if you want to press on it, they really want something to happen, here's where the final, recommendations get in.
But not necessarily, because if they want to build again, they can still put 12 more houses there.
Oh, I just mean, if you want to make that piece contingent on the approval of this SUP, then it comes down to whether or not they want this to go forward.
Okay, I
Yeah.
To me, more spot, more park space and stuff, and exchange for the high density.
Okay, do we need to talk more about tire fuels or the Main Street parking or the floodplain?
Well, I guess my question would be hybrid fuel amendment. We brought this up last time, so entrance corridor, there are trees along Valley Street there.
Yes.
Is there any way to, I don't know, It says this buffer prohibits any construction activity, including clearing vegetation in 20 feet of residential rural area district.
Yep.
So does that, I drove by that today, are those trees within that 20 feet? I mean, I guess my concern is rezoning or allowing that to go through without
Well,
protecting.
the issue that they want to change is that because the driveway is that village residential buffer, then the 20 feet extends onto the property zone commercial.
Yeah.
So they're asking that the map be amended so that that driveway portion of village residential is removed and becomes commercial. And that way the buffer is from the edge of the VDOT right of way on the 20 instead of from the interior edge of the driveway parcel property line, if that makes sense. Matt, can you pull up a map with the, oh, well, the dotted line there, okay, the dotted line here is the current parcel boundary, right? Am I correct in that, Matt?
Okay.
Yes.
So currently, this is the driveway that goes down to that lower parcel, and this is zone village residential. And so that vegetation buffer, Zach, that you identified there, is 20 feet off of this interior property line. And so it impacts a portion of their commercial lot that they have a site plan on.
Explain how it goes there.
This is the original site plan that they came to us with that respected that boundary of 20 feet. What they're requesting here is that we move the dotted line back. They've already undergone this change at the court level. So they own the other property and they have changed the boundaries of these properties so that this is now one contiguous plat. These are no longer two separate things.
So that's already happened.
That's already happened at the court level. They're asking that our zoning map reflect that change and that this portion that had been village residential, the driveway access down to the lower portion, be changed to commercial to reflect it's, you know, now contiguous with their other parcel here.
So the site plan.
And then the site plan changes slightly. That's what this new overlay agreement stuff is.
The
So
shifts
so
are
what had been here ends up here.
Way much farther, much closer to the 20.
And then it also allows them, as you can see, I mean, this is all new landscaping plan then. So they include in that as well.
So they just put that plan, which even after our, you're gonna put the channel. Claim that they were gonna do that. Once we give up.
So they're gonna cut down all those old trees and plant something new.
I talked to the engineer today, and they're gonna walk it and see about some of the mature oaks there and see if they can save them. Grading the site generally involves clearing it and building new. So that,
And what is it, 30 or 40 feet,
20 feet, I think it is.
20 feet where they're building?
30
Just
feet.
move their building a little bit?
yeah, the
So we would have to lose all of those old growth trees so they can move their building a little bit?
what's, and they,
Trees that aren't that. I mean,
at planning commission, they gave an explanation as to like, what was the point of this? That by shifting all of this way, they made more space at the bottom of the lot. So they talked about another commercial building being available down in here between structural steel and the car wash. They gave the example of a little hair salon building or a small commercial kind of structure. So they're looking to maximize their property and make space for another building here at the bottom edge of it. If you deny, then they go back to the original site plan. There's more buffer space on the edge and the building comes back in here and there's no infill.
They did point out though that denying the change here will not necessarily change their approach to increasing visibility of the lot that they have. They want some of that visibility to be there, and they do have some right to remove vegetation on their property. Even in that entrance corridor, they can go through ARB and you know, make modifications there regardless of whether or not the property boundary is.
That's true. What the zoning request does is affect how close this structure can be to the property line on the road. Because we require that commercial be set back from residential. And right now we've got this, you can see it on that map.
Can we negotiate with them to get some kind of agreement to retain or require some kind of earth through there to?
This is an entrance corridor.
Yeah.
And so the landscaping plan does require some ARB approval. After this step, if you were to choose to change that zoning map, they would have to supply that landscaping plan to ARB. You know, as you point out, there have been problems in the past with some businesses. Zach is certainly familiar with that. I think the applicants here would be quick to point to their track record of maintaining the properties that they
Yeah.
have. They've leaned on that in this application process in the past.
So again, my concern is that unless we have some sort of legal recourse, they can tell us whatever they're gonna do, whatever they want to tell us.
ARB is the legal recourse, yeah. To both approve the plan and enforce its maintenance.
And is there a reason why we haven't done that with the dollars?
We're working on it in a friendly manner before we approach it through the courts, but both options are available to you if you choose that one should
I
be
mean,
more effective than the other.
I have not seen them do anything since they.
I will say, on an ARB,
Cynical.
on an ARB update, the Dollar General is moving forward with their current landscaping plan. So they've had, I don't know, 12 managers in as many months it seems. The turnover in corporate is intense.
Yeah.
And so they've lost management, they've lost contractors, they lost the plans, you know, I mean.
Yeah.
So to that point, I think we're on the dial now to get that done.
Okay.
But to your point, I don't feel comfortable approving a rezoning without like a more fleshed out site plan with ARB approval.
Well, that is, I'm sorry, the site.
I guess
plan
that is the site plan, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, this is a teaser of the site plan,
Yeah.
but they
What
can't,
is that? Is that bushes? Is it trees?
yeah, they can't submit the site plan until they know which way we're going on the side.
It's
I see it,
tens of thousands of dollars in every year.
So, you know, I don't know if there's something we can put in some kind of language like.
Well, I guess,
Able to see the building because of vegetation. or
so I guess
something.
what you're saying procedurally, we would approve this. And then it would be the ARB's purview to require a site plan, which would then be enforceable by the town, which could include how do we handle the trees that are there? How do we get some new planting to ensure that they're native species?
Right.
All of those would go through the ARB.
Yeah, so you have already approved the zoning, the special use permit zoning change on this block within the dotted line. They have purchased this additional property and already at the courts made that contiguous with this parcel. They're asking for the zoning change to reflect the property boundary adjustment. And then if you approve that zoning map adjustment, then yes, Zach, the site plans, landscaping components will go through ARB. The site plan still goes through planning commission, correct?
Yeah.
So the site plan itself still moves through planning commission for approval. The entrance corridor landscaping plan moves through ARB for approval. And then, once all of those approvals have been issued, they can get their building permits and go forward.
So I think what's important to the town is to keep that green space there, and keep that visual barrier as you're coming in.
Yes.
And in exchange for this rezoning, I'd like to get some kind of legally enforceable agreement saying that they're gonna keep that visual barrier there. I mean, otherwise, we're just getting, you know, we're not getting anything back for, the town's not getting anything back from this change. I mean, they're asking us to make an exception. And I think we're willing to do that, but at the same time, we want to have some kind of guarantee that, you know, you're not gonna do damage to the town in the process of that. And I don't.
Everybody's gonna go see that. I don't feel like you have to see it. Everybody's gonna notice it.
This is another one procedurally that, you know, you have the opportunity to call a public hearing on. We'll have the applicants here to respond to these. They heard some of those concerns from neighbors directly across the road and at the planning commission process and seem to be responsive to the concern of, you know, and this is right across the street from me, They pointed out some, existing things that won't change, such as the elevation change. Some of that visual screening happens as the road on Route
It
20
drops. yeah.
drops below the level of the development there. But yes, they did also express that, it's a commercial business for them. They're willing to work with those concerns, but they want to be able to retain some amount of, presence on that corner.
Record is one thing.
Right. No, and that's, I think where that, yeah, they expressed, appreciation of concern to the neighbors across the street there, but sort of concern from their own perspective of visibility.
Yeah, that's totally.
Well, I have meetings with them, and they seem to have what we want, especially since we go to the special use permit. That seems to make them happy. So I just can't figure out why they wanted to buy the road.
They did, that question came up at the planning commission process, and they said that they would have brought this entire proposal forward had they been able to close on the other property at the time, but because that real estate transaction was still in process, they weren't able to talk about it.
So they're going to buy all along with the truth.
Yes, yeah, I think that had been expressed, and so that the hope had been that they'd be able to make that adjustment to the property boundary, but because the transaction hadn't gone through, they just want the resident that.
No, as well as maybe.
Okay.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
I just want to review just a couple action items. I get conversation here today, particularly about Bird Street. It seems like two lingering questions that I would like to talk about. I think Mr. Munson would as well. Is this the HOA relationship with the town? It's sort of like, I understand that it may be a contingency of building commercially these days. But in terms of maintenance of trails and things like that, even word that came up that scares Dan.
It's a good word.
It's a good word. What the relationship is to the town, so, because I think the issue is, will we lose public access to something if we punt responsibility? That's the question. Then the other one is this sort of bargaining chip negotiation about density. If we got 36 homes on one site, is it possible to get a guarantee that the other side, either undeveloped or someone donated to the town? I think those are interesting things. Either hear back from the property owner about, or just to get clarification about in terms of our own.
And I think what Stuart's, the both of you, but going back to Stuart said, there is a sense of trying to figure out how do you get the best deal in any one of these situations for the town. So in other words, we don't have to play all our cards at once, so to speak. We can play them carefully. And I mean, we're already well into the game, but going back to the tree issue, I share your concern. I'm not sure how to make it happen, but it's
Okay. Parking. Parking.
So we're clear on what that does, that the historic commercial buildings on Valley Street do not have requirements for parking lots. When someone buys one of those buildings, they don't have to build a parking lot because there's nowhere to put a parking lot. So we have that exception on Valley Street. That feels like pretty common sense how to use the historic district. Main Street doesn't have the same language. So I've heard this specifically as a concern for buyers at the old post office building. And it's also been an issue at the old bus station building, where what they want to do, they can't meet our regulations for required parking. That you could put, say, a restaurant of a certain size in the post office. There's 10 parking spaces there. That means 6 restaurant tables. That's not a restaurant.
The floor space at the post office could accommodate 50 tabletops, and that would be a functional business. Our parking requirements would require them to have a 2-floor parking garage for that, which makes it inconceivable.
So I think we have ample on-street parking on Main Street, both east side and west side. So matching the parking exemption would seem to make sense. And I know it would help move those buildings.
Oh, while we're talking about parking, I've noticed there's no signs on eastbound West Main in front of the old veterinarian office. Nothing that says no parking on that side. People are starting to
yes.
park
Which
there in
side?
front of Kathy
Uh-huh.
Mars's.
Yeah.
And it creates a little congestion. Then somebody approached me today and said, you know, going up Bird Street, you don't have, there's no parking in the first block on the right-hand side. But there's no signs in the second block up towards your house, and people are, you know, for whatever reason, needing to go into the Episcopal Church for Meals on Wheels or whatever they do, and they're parking there. And then so people going to the library have to swing around to the left. And about that time, somebody's racing away from the library, coming down in front of Thomas's house. And he almost had an accident.
I'm
He
sure
told
there
me.
is a parking restriction on that block of Birch Street though.
So I told him I would bring it up since we're talking about
Yeah.
parking, something to think about. And even if we just put signs up that said no parking except Sundays or something like that, like we did for the Presbyterian Church.
Right. And on Main Street to paint it on the side that we
Yeah.
want and sign it on the other.
You know, our streets are tight enough anyhow when you got somebody that's parked where even though it doesn't say no parking, it's still, it's one of those courtesy things. They don't want to walk any further than they have to, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, so we're finished with parking.
Yep.
All right, floodplain. What's that about?
The state model ordinance update, being overdue.
Okay, is that just something we're gonna vote on Monday?
It's all of the planning commission reports require their own public hearings, so it'll be up to you how you want to schedule those.
Okay.
December, January.
Yeah, I think, you know, our meeting in December is scheduled for the 21st, which is Christmas week. I just as soon put off any public hearings to after the first of the year.
Yep.
That's okay with everybody.
Was that?
For me, I was never for
Unless you want to cancel
Yeah.
your Christmas time meeting or do something fun for the week of Christmas.
We can talk
You can
about it at the
still-
work session the week before.
Well, and any administrative changes that we've gotten to, things like rules of procedure changes or anything that doesn't require public hearing, you'd still be able to attend to that kind of regular business, you know, that meeting if you wanted to, if you didn't want to cancel it out.
Hey, what is the Thomas Jefferson Planning District up to?
I got that one place there. Thank you. It's an option for the town to endorse. I'm passing forward the version of this that Albemarle got. The other counties in the district also take a look at this too. The PDC endorses a consensus legislative package. I'm pretty impressed with how they reached that consensus. It's pretty hard to get the Charlottesville City Council and the Louisa County Board of Supervisors to agree on much, but it generally has to do with giving us more independent power on things like zoning and giving us more money on things like schools and sidewalks and police. The other localities in the region have been endorsing this as we get closer to the January legislative session. I'll invite you to take a look through it, and I'm happy to follow up on any of these topics that are in here. If you see fit to endorse it, it just helps our shared lobbyists go forward and help try to get these things done.
So we can just have it as an agenda item to vote on.
If you please.
Does that sound all right with everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay. And plastic bags. I've got a trunk full of them. What can I do with them?
Easy answer. It's not in this legislative program. The state law that passed last year allowed cities and counties to run this plastic bag tax. Albemarle is thinking about it, and that would cover the town. The town does not have the power to run this on its own. If you think that Albemarle's tax is a good idea or bad idea, we can tell the board, but we can't go our own way on it.
Okay, and the agreement on the vehicle license fee.
The town used to sell decals for the vehicle license fee that we put on the cars. We stopped doing that and started, this was 7 years ago, and started working with Albemarle County where it's attached to the car tax. So you get your car tax bill and it's also got a vehicle license fee. They've been collecting that money for us and giving it to us, but there was never anything more than a handshake agreement for them to do that. Between their turnover and our staff turnover, for a while, they stopped sending us that money. So we're back squared up on it now, but the state law allows for a contract that we do that together. And that's the strong recommendation of the county's new finance director, and I think it would help us too for consistency. So the county board approved that. They're allowed to take a shipping and handling 2% of that money, which I think is fair for their staff work. So the county board approved that last week, and we can put that into effect if we vote same next time.
I would point out one byproduct of this conversation has already been a cleaning up and checking of the records and a reconciliation. You'll notice in your budget report that we are ahead of schedule on the vehicle license tax. I think that's directly attributable to this.
They didn't used to do it on any kind of clear schedule.
Right.
So, this is like personal property tax on vehicle.
It's a flat fee. Next time you get this bill, take a look at it. It's a flat fee of $30 or so. And then the value added of your vehicle, however value it is on top of that.
Yeah.
So the per 1,000 rate goes to the county. The flat fee goes here.
You'll remember at our last budget cycle, this was one of our changes to the tax rates that we made. It's one where, we can issue, unlike property tax, for instance, where if we add 10 cents, it goes on top of what we're already paying to Albemarle County.
Yes.
Vehicle license fee is paid to the direct municipality,
We just
and then that sort of larger jurisdiction can take whatever's on top if their rate is higher.
Mhm.
So Albemarle County had a higher rate, which meant all of our residents were paying the Albemarle County rate, and we were only taking the lower Scottsville rate. Albemarle County was collecting the difference. So we raised our rate to match Albemarle County, which effectively meant they weren't taking any money now for the trouble that they were going through of collecting the remittance for us.
That's right.
So we engaged in this process again, because we were also working on an informal handshake agreement. Encoding that agreement and making it enforceable. And here we are.
Can we do that with Louisiana too?
We need to.
Yeah, so this will be a template now that we can go and meet with the Fluvanna County supervisor and say, this is what we're doing with Albemarle County, please.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir. Busy.
Well, it's been long, but we accomplished a lot tonight, I think. And again, thank everybody for being here. And if you can make it tomorrow night, great. And if you can't, that's certainly understandable. So have a
We're
good
meeting an hour earlier than our normal.
Yes,
time.
6 months ago.
Thank you.
well, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.